Thalassa Voss was having what could generously be described as a bad day. Europa's underwater research dome, her home, and prison all rolled into one icy nightmare, was acting up again. The dome groaned as if it were an old man with a bum knee, and every so often the lights flickered like some cheesy horror movie set waiting for the killer to appear. Not that there was a killer. Yet. "Commander Voss, the seismic readings are going haywire," said Dr. Zet Kor, the resident genius who had all the social grace of a drunk porcupine. Voss grunted, which was about as much enthusiasm as she could muster. "Great. Maybe it's just Europa's way of telling us we're not welcome." Zet adjusted his glasses, which seemed to perpetually slide down the bridge of his nose. "Or, could be the alien life forms that nobody believes in except those crackpot conspiracy theorists back on Earth. You mean the same ones who think the moon landing was staged?" Voss replied, eyebrow arched like a cynical rainbow. Zet shrugged. "Hey, I'm just saying." Voss had been in command of this miserable tub for about 2 years and had decided that 2 years was approximately 731 days too many. If she had a credit for every time a scientist told her about strange disturbances in the aquatic environment, she could buy herself a ticket back to Earth and leave the damn place to the plankton. "All right, people," she called out to the assortment of nerds and misfits masquerading as a research team. "What's the latest? And make it quick. I've got a date with a cup of synthetic coffee. Microbial activity is off the charts," said Miko, their biologist, who had the unfortunate habit of speaking as if she were narrating an educational video for toddlers. "It's like they're having a rave down there." Voss sighed. "Lovely. Maybe they can teach us some new dance moves. Anything else?" "The water temperature is fluctuating," chimed in Ivor, the engineer with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow and a voice that could peel paint. "But hey, at least it's not boiling yet." Comforting. Voss sipped her coffee, which tasted like liquid despair with a hint of acid reflux. "So, we've got microbial raves and temperamental waters. Anyone want to place bets on what's next? Giant squid invasion. Maybe the ice will finally crack and put us out of our misery." Zet was still staring at his screens, his face illuminated by data that could be summarized as "we're screwed." "Commander, I think we need to send a rover down to check." "Oh, good," Voss said with mock enthusiasm. "Because sending expensive equipment into potentially hazardous situations has never gone wrong in the history of ever. It's either that or sit here doing nothing," Zet argued. "And let's be honest, sitting around waiting is just another term for a slow, boring death." She couldn't argue with that logic. "Fine," she conceded. "Deploy the rover. And cross your fingers it doesn't get eaten by whatever's throwing a party down there." As the team busied themselves with preparations, Voss leaned back in her uncomfortable chair, staring out the window at the murky waters of Europa's ocean. It was beautiful in a way, albeit the kind of beauty that was likely to kill you if you got too close. "You ever think about just leaving?" Ivor asked, appearing beside her with a mug of his own. "Going back to Earth, maybe finding a beach somewhere that isn't frozen." Voss chuckled darkly. "Every damn day. But then I'd miss out on all this." She gestured vaguely at the cold, damp dome and its flickering lights. The glamour and excitement of potential alien encounters, right? Because Earth is just swarming with those," Ivor said, rolling his eyes. "Still, can't say I'd miss this place. It has all the charm of a frozen morgue." Voss raised her mug in a mock toast. "To Europa, where the cough is terrible, the work's thankless, and the company, well, at least you're not completely insufferable." Ivor responded in kind. "High praise indeed coming from you." Their camaraderie was short-lived as Zet's voice crackled over the intercom. "Rovers ready to deploy." Voss took a deep breath, her earlier sarcasm giving way to the grim determination of someone who knew how often things went wrong in this line of work. "Let's get it done then." The control room was a mess of wires and screens, each one displaying different parts of a situation that was likely to end in disaster. The team crowded around the main monitor, where the rover's camera feed would soon show them what lay beneath the ice. "Here we go," Zet said, fingers dancing over the controls like a concert pianist on speed. The screen flickered to life, showing the rover's slow descent into the cold, dark waters. It was like watching a horror movie unfold in real time, only they were the hapless victims and the killer was still hiding off-screen. "Anything yet?" Miko asked, sounding more hopeful than anyone had a right to be. Zet shook his head. "Just water and algae so far. Great." "Let's hope it stays that way," Voss muttered under her breath. The rover continued its journey, the camera picking up the occasional shimmer of bioluminescent critters that floated by like drunks after last call. "Wait, what's that?" Ivor pointed at the screen. Everyone leaned in, squinting at a shape that had appeared in the distance. It was too big to be a rock, too smooth to be anything natural. "Is that a ship?" Miko gasped. Voss felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Looks like it. Zet, get us a closer look." The rover obediently moved toward the mysterious shape, and as it did, the details became clearer. It was a ship, all right, but it was like no ship they'd ever seen. "That design. It's not human," Zet whispered, as if afraid to disturb the silence that had settled over the room like a suffocating blanket. "No kidding," Voss said, her heart pounding in her chest. "Everyone stay sharp. We might be making history here or becoming a footnote in someone else's." The rover's lights washed over the alien ship, revealing sleek lines and glowing symbols that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. "Commander, we're picking up energy readings," Zed announced, his voice tight with excitement and fear. "Of course we are," Voss said, her sarcasm now just a defense mechanism against the mounting dread. "Because why wouldn't a ghost ship be active?" Miko looked like she was about to burst with questions, none of which Voss had answers to. "What do we do?" Voss turned to her team, her earlier flippancy replaced by the weight of command. "We document everything. And pray this thing doesn't wake up and eat us for breakfast." The tension in the room was as thick as the ice above them, every eye glued to the screen as the rover continued its exploration. The alien ship loomed larger, its presence a silent reminder that maybe humans weren't as alone in the universe as they liked to pretend. "Commander," Zet said, his voice trembling slightly. "We've got movement inside the ship." Voss felt her stomach drop. "Define movement." "I'm not sure," Zed admitted, tapping furiously at his console. "But whatever it is, it's coming our way." "Well, isn't that just the cherry on top of this crap sundae?" Ivor muttered, his earlier bravado evaporating. Voss took a deep breath, forcing herself to focus. "All right, people. I want eyes on every sensor we've got. If something's coming, we're not going to be caught with our pants down." The team moved with purpose, a flurry of activity that belied the fear gnawing at the edges of their resolve. Voss watched the screens, her mind racing with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. "Commander, the energy readings are spiking," Zet said, his voice climbing an octave. "Hold steady," Voss ordered, though she couldn't help but feel like she was whistling past the graveyard. The alien ship seemed to pulse with life, the symbols glowing brighter as if responding to some unseen command. "What the hell is it doing?" Miko asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's trying to talk to us," Ivor suggested, though the doubt in his voice was palpable. "Or maybe it's charging its death ray," Zet added helpfully. "Let's hope it's the former," Voss said, her eyes never leaving the screen. But deep down, she had a sinking feeling that whatever was coming, it wasn't here to make friends. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," she ordered, even as she knew there was nowhere to run in the confines of their little dome. The alien ship's glow intensified, the symbols now a blinding light that filled the monitor. "Brace yourselves," Voss said, her voice steady even as her heart threatened to leap out of her chest. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the light faded, leaving them in darkness once more. "What happened?" Miko asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Voss admitted, staring at the screen where the ship had been. "But whatever just happened, I don't think it was a friendly hello." The silence that followed was deafening, the implications of their discovery hanging heavy in the air. They had found something on Europa, all right, but whether it was a miracle or a nightmare remained to be seen. and Voss had a feeling it was going to be the latter. The hum of tension in the room was like a badly tuned orchestra, each note a reminder that their little undersea dome was one catastrophic hiccup away from becoming a very expensive fish tank. Thalassa Voss stood at the center of it all, trying to look like she had a plan. But the truth was, she was as clueless as a tourist in a Martian back alley. Ivar scratched his beard, which seemed to be a permanent fixture on his face as much as the worry lines on Voss's. "So we found a ship and it might be alive," he said slowly, as if tasting the words. Voss nodded. "And it might want to eat us." Miko piped up, her voice still unnaturally chipper. "Or it could be friendly." Ivar and Voss exchanged a look that spoke volumes. "Yeah, and maybe it's got chocolate and puppies in there too," Ivar said. Zet for once wasn't glued to his console. Instead, he was pacing like a caged animal, his thoughts clearly racing faster than a light-speed shuttle. "We should try communication," he suggested, though he sounded about as confident as a politician caught in an honesty contest. "With what, Zet?" "Morse code." "Smoke signals?" Voss asked, her sarcasm sharp enough to cut through the tension. "No," Zet replied, his eyes narrowing on his screen again. "There's a protocol for this, something about universal signals." "Great idea," Voss deadpanned. "Let's use classic Earth music. Aliens love that, right?" Next thing we know, they'll be demanding roll call for the greatest hits of humanity tour. It was about then that Cadden Rhyme, their so-called diplomatic officer, decided to stroll in. He had the kind of swagger that suggested he was either highly competent or completely delusional. Voss was betting on the latter. "I hear we've got potential ET in the neighborhood," Rhyme said, grinning like he'd just won the interstellar lottery. "Yeah, and they might just be here to repossess our planet," Voss replied. "Feel like earning your paycheck." Rhyme shrugged, the kind of shrug that said he was either going to save them all or get them killed trying. "Let's see what they want, or who they want to eat first," Ivar muttered under his breath. Rhyme ignored him, pulling up a chair next to Zet's console. "Let's start with a friendly greeting," he suggested, effortlessly slipping into his role like a man who actually believed in diplomacy. "Sure, what do you suggest?" "Hello, do you come in peace or pieces?" Voss asked. Rhyme smirked. "Something like that." Zet tapped a few keys, bringing up a selection of signals designed to convey peaceful intentions. "Starting with the basics," he said, as if that explained anything. They sent out their message, a series of pulses and tones meant to signify that humanity was curious, open, and hopefully not on the menu. The team watched the screens, anticipation mingling with dread. "Well, this is cozy," Ivar remarked, breaking the silence. "Reminds me of waiting for my ex to text back." "Only slightly less terrifying." Miko, ever the optimist, leaned forward. "Maybe they'll reply with blueprints for a new energy source. Or instructions on how to make better coffee," Ivar suggested. That got a chuckle from Voss. "Yeah, right. If they can improve this sludge, they'll be our new overlords by lunchtime." The alien ship, however, remained cryptically silent, the screen showing no change in its ominous presence. "Maybe they are ignoring us," Miko suggested, ever hopeful. "Or maybe they're still deciding whether we're pests or guests," Ivar added. Then, just as the tension threatened to strangle the room, a signal pinged back. It was a sound, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat amplified through the cosmos. "That's something," Zet said, ever the master of understatement. Rhyme leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "It's a pattern, but not one I've seen before." "Great. So we're dealing with aliens with a flair for mystery," Voss said. "What's it saying?" Rhyme listened, his face a mask of concentration. "It's a question," he finally concluded. "They want to know about bravery." Voss blinked. "Bravery, they're asking if we're brave, or what it means to us," Rhyme clarified. "They want to understand human courage." "Fantastic. They want a crash course in bravery," Ivar quipped. "Do we send them clips from action movies now?" "More like they want to test it," Rhyme said grimly. "I'm guessing they're not interested in our movie collection." Voss groaned inwardly. Alien beings interested in their peculiar brand of insanity. What a treat. "So how do we prove we're brave?" "Volunteer for a kamikaze mission." Rhyme shook his head. Let's start by telling them about our history, human perseverance and all that jazz. Sounds like a lot of fluff, Ivor said. Can't we just tell them we wrestle space bears for fun? Voss shot him a look. Ivor, you're not helping. Zet was already compiling data. I've got records ready. Achievements, challenges, wars. Great. Let's hope they like bedtime stories, Voss snorted. The team watched as their messages were sent to the alien ship, a digital dossier on human tenacity wrapped up with a bow. Think they'll buy it? Miko asked, her fingers crossed like she was wishing on a lottery ticket. Who knows, Rhyme said. But if they don't, we might just have to give them a live demonstration. Voss shook her head. Wonderful, because nothing says welcome like a trial by fire. The alien vessel, still as a tomb, suddenly flickered with lights. Symbols danced across its hull like ghostly fingers trying to communicate. Incoming transmission, Zed announced, his voice a blend of excitement and dread. The message came through, a series of images and sounds. Scenes of human struggle, both historical and personal, played out on the screen like an alien PowerPoint presentation. They're showing us what they think bravery is, Miko said, eyes wide. Voss watched, a sense of unease settling in her gut. It was as if the aliens were holding up a mirror, reflecting humanity's darkest and brightest moments back at them. Looks like they're testing us, Ivor said, his earlier flippancy replaced with something like awe. Or trying to understand what makes us tick, Rhyme added, his usual swagger tempered by the gravity of the moment. Voss crossed her arms, her mind racing. All right, team. How do we convince them we're brave enough to stick around? Rhyme grinned, that reckless confidence back in his eyes. We show them, the real deal, no fluff. By surviving this madness, Voss asked. Exactly, Rhyme replied. If there's one thing humans are good at, it's surviving against the odds. The air crackled with tension, the room silent save for the hum of machinery. Voss felt the weight of their discovery, the choices they would have to make, pressing down on her like the icy waters above. All right, she finally said. Let's give them a reason to believe we're as crazy as we are brave. The team moved with a renewed sense of purpose, each member laser-focused on the task at hand. Voss felt a strange sense of camaraderie, a bond forged in the face of the unknown. As they worked, the alien ship continued to loom in the background, a silent sentinel watching their every move. Voss couldn't shake the feeling that they were being tested, weighed, and measured by an intelligence that might just decide their fate. Commander, Zet said, breaking the silence. They're sending coordinates. Voss leaned in, her eyes narrowing. For what? Something outside the dome, Zet replied. They want us to go. Brilliant. We're getting a tour, Ivor muttered. Hope they have refreshments. Rhyme nodded, a spark of excitement in his gaze. Let's check it out. Could be the key to proving our worth. Voss sighed, knowing there was no turning back now. All right, team, gear up. We're about to meet our alien neighbors. As the team prepared for their expedition, the air was thick with anticipation and dread. Voss couldn't help but wonder what bravery truly meant to these aliens and whether they'd measure up. Ready? She asked, her eyes scanning her team. Not really, but let's do it anyway, Ivor said, his grin lopsided. With that, they set out, leaving the safety of the dome behind. The water was cold and dark, a reminder of just how precarious their situation was. As they approached the coordinates, Voss felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Whatever awaited them could change everything, or end it. The alien ship hovered in the distance, a promise and a threat all at once. Voss led her team forward, determined to prove that humanity was made of sterner stuff. As they reached the site, a strange structure appeared out of the gloom, its alien architecture both beautiful and terrifying. It pulsed with light, beckoning them closer. Looks inviting, Ivor said, his voice tinged with sarcasm. Or like a trap, Miko added. Rhyme's gaze was steely. Only one way to find out. Voss took a deep breath, bracing herself for whatever lay ahead. Let's show them what we're made of. Together, they moved toward the unknown, each step a testament to humanity's courage and foolishness. Voss didn't know what they would find, but she was damn sure of one thing. they'd face it head-on with all the bravery and insanity that made them human. The water outside was as murky as the situation inside. Voss and her ragtag collection of misfits trudged back into the undersea dome, their suits dripping with the chill of Europa's oceans. Inside, there was a kind of tension that only comes when people are waiting for something to explode and hoping it isn't them. Veridian Gale, the dome's resident scientist and unmatched in the art of looking perpetually annoyed, was waiting for them. Her face was set in an expression of someone who just heard a joke but realized too late it was on her. "You're back," she said, in a tone that suggested she wasn't sure whether to be relieved or disappointed. "Yeah, and we didn't even get abducted," Ivor quipped, peeling off his helmet. "Better luck next time, I guess." Voss shot him a look. "Can we save the comedy ire for when the aliens aren't knocking on our door?" Gale's eyes flicked to the screens behind her, where the alien ship still loomed, as ominous as a debt collector with a grudge. "They've been sending more signals. Patterns I can't quite crack, more cryptic heartbeats." Zet asked, rubbing his hands together like a kid about to open birthday presents. "Something like that." "But there's an urgency now," Gale replied, her fingers dancing over the console, almost like they're probing. Rhyme sat up, all interest. "Didn't think the greeting card from humanity left much to the imagination." "Not that kind of probing, you idiot," Gale snapped. "They're testing the dome systems, triggers, countermeasures, responses. It's like they want to know what makes us tick, or what makes us explode," Ivor added, ever the pessimist. "Fantastic," Voss muttered. "Our alien guests are hackers, pretty advanced ones too," Zet chimed in. "They've already bypassed some of our basic defenses. If they keep this up, they'll know more about our systems than we do." Miko, the eternal optimist, still managed a cheery grin. "Maybe they're just curious, or they're planning a hostile takeover," Voss retorted. "I'm not keen on living under alien management." Gale leaned in, her expression softening for the briefest moment. "We need to outsmart them. Show them human ingenuity." "Great," Rhyme said. "Let's remind them that while we might not have tentacles, we've got something better." "What?" Ivor asked. "An impressive capacity for self-destruction," Gale sighed. "Adaptability. If they're testing us, let's give them a show they won't forget." The team gathered around the console, a motley crew of cynics, dreamers, and the occasional reluctant hero. Zet started outlining a strategy with the kind of enthusiasm that only a techie can muster. "Okay, listen up," he began, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "If they're poking around in our systems, let's give them something to chew on. We'll flood them with false data. Make it look like we're doing 100 things at once, like faking a full-scale evacuation," Ivor suggested. "Exactly," Zet replied. "Let's confuse the hell out of them. They won't know what's real and what's not." Voss nodded, her mind racing through possibilities. "All right, we'll need to work fast. Miko, you're on comms. I need you to keep our internal channels open. Ivor, work with Zet on the false signals. Rhyme, you handle any diplomatic fallout. What about me?" Gale asked, arching an eyebrow. "You're the brains behind this operation, remember?" Voss said. "Keep an eye on those probes. If they get too close, I want to know." The team scattered, each member taking their place in this impromptu symphony of deception. Voss watched them go, a strange mix of pride and anxiety gnawing at her insides. True to form, Zet was already building a virtual labyrinth, a digital maze designed to baffle even the most determined alien interloper. The screens flickered with data, some real, some not, creating a kaleidoscope of action that would have made a lesser mind weep. "Think this'll work?" Rhyme asked, leaning against the console with that infuriating calm of his. "It better," Voss replied, "or we're going to look really stupid when the aliens call our bluff." Rhyme chuckled. "Hey, if there's one thing humans are good at, it's improvising." And sarcasm, Ivor called over his shoulder. "Don't forget sarcasm." As the minutes ticked by, the room buzzed with tension. Gale monitored the alien signals, her fingers tapping a rhythm of their own as she worked to keep their systems one step ahead. "They're persistent, I'll give them that," she murmured. but they don't seem to understand the concept of human unpredictability. Good, Voss said. Let's use that to our advantage. Outside, the alien ship continued its silent vigil, a reminder of the thin line they walked between peace and annihilation. Inside, the team pressed on, their every move a testament to human ingenuity or reckless abandon, depending on your perspective. "All right," Zed announced, looking up from his workstation. "We're ready. I've got enough false data here to keep them busy for a while. Time to see if they bite," Voss replied. Miko activated the comms, her cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to the tension filling the room. "And we're live. Let's dazzle them with some top-grade human deception. Here goes nothing," Rhyme muttered. As the false data streamed out into the void, Voss held her breath, waiting for the alien response. The seconds stretched into eternity, each one heavier than the last. Then, without warning, the dome shuddered, a ripple of energy passing through its structure like a shiver. Lights flickered, consoles dimmed, and for a heart-stopping moment, all was silent. "Was that a good shudder or a bad shudder?" Ivor asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and dread. "Well, we're not dead, so I'm counting that as a win," Zet replied. Gail's eyes were glued to her screen, her expression shifting from concern to something resembling satisfaction. "They're confused. Signals are erratic. I think it's working." "Great," Voss said, exhaling the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Now let's keep them that way." Rhyme clapped his hands together, a grin splitting his face. "See, nothing to it. Just a little human ingenuity at play, or insanity," Ivor said. "I can never tell the difference." The dome settled into a tense rhythm, the team working tirelessly to maintain their ruse. Voss knew they were walking a tightrope, but it was all they had. Every minute they bought was another chance to tip the scales in humanity's favor. As they worked, Zet's console beeped, a sharp note cutting through the quiet like a knife. He frowned, eyes scanning the data. Commander, you might want to see this," he said. Voss moved to his side, her gaze locking onto the screen. A new signal had appeared, different from the probing patterns. It was a message, clear and unmistakable. "They want to talk," Zet said, as incredulous as he was wary. Rhyme rubbed his hands together, that dangerous glint back in his eyes. "Well, I do love a good conversation." "Careful," Voss warned. "This could be a trap, but it could also be an opportunity," Gale added, her voice thoughtful. "If we play this right, we might learn what they want." Voss hesitated, weighing her options. Trust was a fragile thing, easily shattered in the cold depths of space. But so was courage, and right now they needed all they could muster. "All right," she said finally, nodding to Miko. "Open a channel. Let's see what our cosmic guests have to say." The room held its collective breath as the connection hummed to life, the silence broken only by the whisper of static. Voss steeled herself, ready for anything, or so she hoped. A voice crackled through the speakers, its tone resonant and strangely melodic. It spoke in words that were both alien and etchingly familiar, as if each syllable was a reflection of their own thoughts. "Humanity," the voice began, its cadence slow and deliberate. "We observe your resilience and seek understanding." "Well, that's one way to start a conversation," Rhyme said, flashing Voss a grin. "Quiet," Voss hissed, focusing on the voice. "Keep it talking. We need to know what they want." Gale's fingers danced over her console, recording every word. "I'm analyzing the speech patterns. There's something more beneath the surface." "What do you mean?" Zet asked. "It's layered," Gale explained. "Like they're saying one thing but implying another." "Great. Alien riddles," Ivor grumbled. "Just what we needed." The voice continued, its words weaving a tapestry of curiosity and caution. "Your capacity for survival intrigues us. We wish to learn the nature of your bravery." "Ah, so it's a science project," Rhyme said, unable to resist a dig. "They're studying us like lab rats. More like trying to figure out if we're worth saving," Voss replied, her eyes hard. "Or if we're just a passing curiosity." Gale's eyes flicked to Voss, a question unspoken but clear. "What do we tell them?" "Let's stick to the truth," Voss decided, drawing a breath. "Tell them we value life, freedom, and the right to choose our own fate." Rhyme nodded, stepping up to the console with all the confidence of a man who'd never faced an alien existential crisis before. All right, let's show them what makes humanity tick. As the exchange unfolded, each word carefully chosen, Voss couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something vast and unknowable. Outside, the alien ship loomed, silent but ever watchful. A reminder of the delicate dance they danced, a waltz of words and willpower. "What do you think they'll do?" Miko asked quietly, her optimism tempered by the weight of the moment. "Depends," Voss replied. "On whether they see us as allies or curiosities or dinner," Ivor added because of course he did. The voice on the other end shifted, its tone contemplative. "We see potential in your species. A spark of defiance, that's us," Zet murmured. Defiant to the end, the connection flickered, a heartbeat of uncertainty before the voice spoke again. "Continue to survive, humanity. We will watch and learn," and just like that the connection was severed, the silence rushing back like a returning tide. "Well," Rhyme said, straightening up, "that was enlightening or terrifying," Ivor offered. Voss let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "We've bought ourselves time. Let's make the most of it." The room relaxed, the tension easing like a knot untangled. For now they had a reprieve, a chance to catch their breath before the next storm. "What do we do now?" Miko asked, her eyes bright with hope. "We keep surviving," Voss replied, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "And remind them that humanity isn't so easily defined." Together, the team returned to their tasks, each one a testament to their resilience and determination. In the cold depths of space, they'd found their courage, and it was enough to make even the most cynical soul believe in something more. As they worked, the alien ship remained in the distance, a silent guardian of their unfolding story. Voss watched it with a mix of caution and curiosity, knowing that their journey was far from over. But for now, they were alive. And in this unforgiving universe, that was enough. For now. The dome's undersea hum settled into a familiar rhythm, the kind that could lull you into forgetting you were one malfunction away from becoming a human popsicle. But as life's cruel irony would have it, that rhythm was short-lived. "Pax, you got a minute? Or are you too busy playing with your glorified Tinker toys?" Voss's voice crackled over the intercom, drenched in the kind of sarcasm that barely masked a simmering panic. Engineer Pax Sable, Europa's resident miracle worker, or overworked mechanic, depending on who you asked, was currently elbow-deep in one of the dome's ventilation shafts. "Depends. Is it another life-or-death situation, or can it wait until I finish duct-taping our oxygen supply? If it's life or death, it's always life. Death's the one we try to keep waiting," Voss snapped back, tapping her foot like it might summon some divine intervention. Systems are failing faster than Ivor's patience. Ivor, sitting nearby and polishing a wrench with the kind of intensity that suggested imminent violence, added, "My patience died screaming long ago." "Can I just say," Rhyme interjected, doing an admirable job of leaning stylishly against a console, "if this whole saving humanity gig doesn't pan out, I've got a future in motivational speaking." "I'd sign up for that," Miko chimed in, ever the optimist. "If we survive." "Cheery as always, Miko," Ivor grumbled. "I'd complain, but it's not like we're drowning in options." Pax emerged, grease-streaked and exasperated, his expression that of a man who'd seen one too many zeros on the repair bill. "All right, what's the crisis du jour?" "Life support's on the fritz," Voss said, her voice dropping into that faux calm often employed by people on the brink of a meltdown. "And I'd rather not suffocate today, thank you." "No promises," Pax muttered, heading toward the central control hub like a man with a bone to pick with the universe. Gale, looking up from a screen filled with dancing alien signals, added her 2 cents. "If it's any consolation, the aliens seem just as perplexed by our existence as we are. Yea, for mutual confusion," Zet quipped, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "They're poking around like they've never seen our brand of chaos before." "Well, it's not chaos, it's strategic improvisation," Rhyme corrected with a grin that could melt tungsten. We're just keeping them on their toes. Speaking of toes, Pax grumbled, tearing his focus from a particularly stubborn circuit board. I could use a hand. Or a leg. Hell, throw a brain in there if you've got one to spare. Ivor tossed his wrench with surprising accuracy to Pax, who caught it in one smooth motion. Don't say I never gave you anything. Appreciate it, Pax said, though his tone was as dry as the Martian desert. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to make sure we're not all gasping for air like fish out of, well, water. He worked his magic, or rather his grim determination, in the bowels of the dome, the kind of place that smelled like sweat, desperation, and faintly of old coffee. Every clang and curse word echoed like a symphony of misery, but slowly, surely, systems hummed back to life. Status, Voss called, her voice a lifeline through the static. Pax twisted a final valve, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. We're back in business, boss. For now, anyway. Good, Voss replied, relief evident even through the intercom's distortion. I'd hate to die before I find out if the aliens are planning a surprise party for us. Party. More like a buffet, Ivor said, ever the pessimist. And I don't feel like being the main course. Well, I'm sure you'd taste terrible, Zet offered, his attempt at humor only partially successful. But hey, maybe they've got bad taste. Guess I should count my blessings, Ivor sighed. Someone's gotta. As the team settled back into their respective duties, the dome's beleaguered systems clanking quietly around them, Pax allowed himself a moment to lean against the nearest wall, surveying the chaos that was his life. You know, Pax said, more to himself than anyone in particular, if I had known being an engineer would mean playing hopscotch with death, I might have reconsidered. Too late for second thoughts, Sable, Voss called over her shoulder. You're stuck with us now. Yeah, Pax muttered, waving a dismissive hand. I'll be in the guts if anyone needs me. You mean we might have to do something ourselves? Rhyme feigned shock, clutching his chest dramatically. I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of responsibility. Don't worry, Rhyme, Miko chimed in, flashing a grin that outshone the emergency lighting. If we all pitch in, we might even manage to stumble our way into survival. Optimism, Gale said, not looking up from her screen. The most sustainable resource we have. And just like that, the dome settled into its uneasy truce with the abyss, each member of the team doing their part to keep the damn thing afloat. Commander, Gale said suddenly, her tone slicing through the chatter like a blade. I've got something. Voss was at her side in an instant, eyes narrowing at the screen. What is it? The aliens are ramping up their tests, Gale said, fingertips playing the console like a piano. They're probing the systems again, harder this time. Like they're trying to crack open a walnut with a sledgehammer. Great, Voss muttered, rubbing her temples. Because what we really need right now is more pressure. Hey, pressure makes diamonds, right? Rhyme said, ever the optimist for someone so keen on sarcasm. Or it makes everything explode, Ivor added. But hey, roll the dice. They're targeting our communications, Zet piped up, glancing over Zet's shoulder. Probably trying to cut us off. Not if I can help it, Zet said, sounding far more confident than he felt. Let's see how they like a bit of human ingenuity in their circuits. Or insanity, Ivor noted, still refusing to let optimism have the last word. As Zet worked his magic, or madness, depending on your perspective, Voss kept one eye on the team, the other on the alien ship lurking outside like a particularly unwelcome houseguest. Keep them talking, keep them guessing, Voss instructed, her focus unwavering. It was a mantra she'd repeated so many times it practically echoed in her sleep. We've bought time before, Rhyme noted, his voice a blend of bravado and fatalism. We can do it again, assuming they don't just blow us out of the water first, Pax added, still elbow-deep in wires and circuits. But hey, no pressure, Voss echoed, her tone a mix of steel and sarcasm. Just the fate of the human race hanging in the balance. At least we'll go out in style, Rhyme said, adjusting his collar with the nonchalance of a man with zero regard for the gravity of their situation. The console beeped ominously, cutting through the bravado. Gale glanced at the screen, her perpetual frown deepening. We're about to find out if Zet's insanity paid off. Outside, the alien ship flickered with a light show of its own, a silent communication that set every nerve on edge. "Prepare for the worst, hope for the best," Voss said, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. "And try not to die." "That'd be great." "Affirmative," Ivor said, as if simply following orders might somehow avert catastrophe. Zet's fingers danced over the keys, each stroke an act of defiance against the tide of alien curiosity. "Sending them a little gift," he muttered, mostly to himself. "Hope they appreciate the effort." The dome shuddered, one of those unsettling shudders that made everyone consider updating their wills. Lights flickered, and for a heartbeat, silence reigned. "Well, that was anticlimactic," Pax observed, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. "I was expecting more bang, less whimper." "Thank God for small mercies," Voss said, casting a wary glance at the ceiling as if it might decide to cave in out of spite. "My signal," Miko announced, tapping her console. "It's stabilizing. Looks like they're backing off," Gale said, relief seeping into her voice. "For now, guess they didn't like Zet's gift," Rhyme smirked. "See? Who says humans don't know how to share? Remind me to send them a thank you card," Zet said dryly, though his eyes were still glued to the console, wary of any sudden surprises. Voss allowed herself a moment to breathe, the tension in her shoulders easing just a fraction. "Good work, team. Let's keep it up. Until when?" Ivor asked, his tone suggesting he wasn't interested in the optimistic answer. "Until we figure out how to make them leave us the hell alone," Voss replied, her eyes still on the alien ship outside. "Or until they get bored and go probe someone else," Pax suggested, a flicker of hope in his weary voice. As the team returned to their routines, the alien ship drifted in the dark, a constant reminder of the stakes. But for now, they'd bought a little more time. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't much, but it was something. And sometimes, when the universe was watching with bated breath, something was all you needed. "Hey, Zet," Miko called out, barely able to suppress his perpetually sunny disposition, even in the face of imminent doom. "Do you think there's a chance we could make peace with them? Maybe they're just misunderstood." "Misunderstood?" Zet scoffed, adjusting his glasses like he was about to deliver a dissertation. "They're not a moody teenager, Miko. They are aliens." "Big difference." "Yeah, one of them might actually spare us," Ivor added with a grimace, casting a wary glance at the looming shadow of the alien ship outside. "And it ain't the aliens." Voss, ever the reluctant captain of this sinking ship, rubbed her temples as though hoping to massage away the universe's collective disdain for their little group. "Let's focus on not dying first, diplomacy second." "There's a plan," Pax grumbled from his station in the corner, elbow deep in circuits that had clearly seen better decades. "Except for the part where every plan we've had so far landed us in deeper trouble." "Always the pessimist, Pax," Rhyme said, leaning back with the kind of lazy grace that suggested he might have once been a model before the universe decided to go to hell. "You ever think about being a motivational speaker?" "Yeah, right after I retire from keeping us all from suffocating in our sleep," Pax shot back, not even pausing in his work. The dome shuddered, a warning shot of sorts, and Voss barely had time to register it before the console exploded in a shower of sparks. She was thrown back, landing hard against the unforgiving metal floor. "Commander," Gale shouted, rushing to her side with a rare flash of concern that looked oddly out of place on her perpetually annoyed face. Voss groaned, feeling like she'd just gone toe-to-toe with a particularly angry asteroid. "I'm fine," she managed, though the blood trickling down her forehead painted a different picture. "Sure you are," Zet said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Bleeding from the head is all the rage this season." Pax peeled himself away from the circuits, his eyes scanning the damage and calculating the odds of survival in real time. "We need her conscious, preferably with a working brain." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Voss muttered, trying to sit up and failing spectacularly. "But I think the aliens just took a more direct approach to negotiations. They're ramping up all right," Gale confirmed, checking the data with a frown deep enough to rival a black hole. Probing harder, almost like they know exactly where to hit us. Great, so they're psychic too, Rhyme said, throwing his hands up. Next they'll be reading our minds, and let me tell you, that's a horror show no one signed up for. Miko, bless his optimistic heart, tried to rally the troops. We need to stay positive, guys. Maybe they're just testing us to see if we're worthy allies. Or they're just testing how long it takes for us to implode, Ivor countered, his patience thinner than the dome's protective layer. And at this rate, not long. Voss struggled to focus, the pain in her head making the world swim in unsettling ways. Keep the system stable, she ordered, though it sounded more like a plea than a command. We can't lose communications. On it, Zet said, already moving to his station with the determination of someone who knew their job was the only thing keeping them alive. Let's see if we can outsmart a species that's light years ahead of us. Sure, because that worked so well the first time, Pax muttered, the cynicism in his voice so thick it could have been cut with a dull knife. The console flickered, and for a moment the lights dimmed, casting the dome into an eerie twilight. It was the kind of atmosphere that made horror movies look like comedies. Status? Rhyme asked, his earlier bravado slipping as the situation grew more dire by the second. We're still here, if that's what you're asking, Gale replied, her fingers flying over the keys as though punching them harder might make the data more favorable. We need to stabilize life support, Pax said, his focus unwavering despite the chaos around him. Without it, we're just sitting ducks, more like gasping fish, Zed added, though his attempt at humor fell flat. It was hard to see the funny side when you were one power surge away from asphyxiation, but Voss couldn't afford to think about that. Her team needed leadership, even if she felt more like a rag doll than a commander at the moment. We just need to buy a little more time, she said, hoping her voice carried more confidence than she felt. Time? I wasn't aware we had any left, Ivor said, though there was a flicker of something in his eyes, determination perhaps, or stubbornness masquerading as resolve. There's always time, Miko insisted, his optimism refusing to die even in the face of overwhelming odds. We just have to make it. And how do you propose we do that? Rhyme asked, his tone more curious than dismissive. Magic, prayers, hope, Miko replied, with the kind of earnestness that could have powered a small star if it was harnessed properly. As the team rallied around their wounded commander, the alien ship continued its relentless assault, probing their defenses with a tenacity that was both impressive and terrifying. It was a game of cat and mouse, and for the moment they were all too aware of which one they were. Keep them talking, Voss said, her vision blurring as she fought to stay conscious. Keep them guessing. Sounds like a plan, Zet said, though his voice was strained with the weight of their predicament. Assuming they don't decide to just turn us into space dust. Let's not give them any ideas, Pax said, his hands moving with practiced efficiency that belied the chaos around him. The lights flickered again, and the temperature in the dome dropped a few degrees, a chilling reminder of how precarious their situation was. It was a balancing act on a tightrope stretched over a pit of despair, and the rope was fraying fast. We're losing heat, Gale noted, her voice as calm as ever despite the dire circumstances. Can't have that, Rhyme said, though his attempt at levity felt more like a coping mechanism than anything else. I left my parka on Earth. And your brain, apparently, Ivor muttered, though there was a hint of camaraderie in his gruffness. Voss felt the darkness closing in, her vision tunneling as consciousness slipped away like water through her fingers. Don't let them win, she mumbled, the words a final command or perhaps just a desperate wish. Not on my watch, Pax said, though his voice was distant, almost an echo in the void. As Voss's world faded to black, the team pressed on, their resolve tested to the breaking point. They were the last line of defense, humanity's unlikely champions against an unknowable enemy, and for better or worse they were all in. The alien ship hovered outside, a silent sentinel that promised destruction or salvation, and the dome was their battlefield. It was a clash of wills, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. "Keep them busy," Zet said, his voice a rallying cry as he worked feverishly at his console. "We can't let them think we're beaten." "Isn't that the truth?" Rhyme said, his usual quips tempered by the gravity of the situation. "We're not done yet." The lights flickered once more, and the team braced themselves for whatever came next. It was a dance with destiny, and they were determined not to miss a step. Even as the alien probes intensified, seemingly predicting their every move, the crew held firm. It was humanity at its finest and most desperate, clinging to hope in the face of overwhelming odds. For now, the dome remained intact, a symbol of defiance against the encroaching void. But the battle was far from over, and the true test of their resolve had only just begun. "Stay sharp," Pax said, a grim determination in his voice. "This isn't over." "Not by a long shot," Miko agreed, his optimism a beacon in the darkness. With their commander down but not out, the team steeled themselves for the fight ahead. They were a ragtag band of survivors, mismatched and flawed but united by a common goal, survival. And as long as there was breath in their bodies and a spark of resistance in their hearts, they would continue to fight. Because that's what humans did. They endured. They persisted. Against all odds, they refused to give up. Cadden Rhyme had seen better days, or at least that's what he told himself while casually lounging in a chair so uncomfortable it must have been designed by sadists. He was the diplomatic officer, the guy who was supposed to keep everyone from collectively losing their cool, and right now, he felt about as useful as a parachute in a submarine. Not to mention, Voss, their fearless leader, was out of commission, leaving him to play both the calming diplomat and the reluctant captain. "All right, folks," Cadden announced, channeling every ounce of confidence he could muster, which admittedly was more delusion than anything else. "Let's turn this little disaster into an opportunity." Pax, grease-stained and perpetually pessimistic, snorted from beneath the console where he was performing what looked like an extremely complicated version of connect the dots with wires. "Opportunity to what?" "Die with style. Less dying, more thinking," Cadden replied, flashing a grin that had been described as charmingly reckless by people who were probably being polite. "I've got a theory." "Must be Tuesday," Zetkor muttered, adjusting his glasses with the precision of someone who only trusted his own judgment, and even then only sometimes. Miko's eyes sparkled with his trademark optimism, which was almost as unnerving as the alien ship outside. "Hit us with it, Rhyme. We could use a good theory about now." "Well, I was thinking," Cadden began, pausing dramatically as though he was about to reveal the meaning of life. "What if the aliens are struggling because they can't grasp human emotions?" There was a beat of silence. Then Gale, perpetually annoyed and currently tasked with keeping an eye on Voss, raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting they're confused by our feelings. That's the plan." "They are aliens," Cadden said, as if it explained everything, which, in his mind, it did. "They can hack our systems, but they can't hack our minds, and thank goodness for that. If I had to explain human emotions, I'd probably confuse myself. So, you're thinking we should out-crazy them?" Ivor's voice held a tone that suggested equal parts skepticism and amusement, which was pretty much his default setting. "Exactly," Cadden said, pointing a finger at Ivor like he was awarding him the grand prize for understanding nonsense. "We give them an emotional roller coaster they can't follow. If they can't predict what we do, they can't beat us." "Ah, chaos," Zet said, a faint smile twitching at his lips. "The original plan of the universe. How do you propose we do this?" Pax asked, his voice muffled by the console he was half merged with. "Throw a temper tantrum, stage a tragic love story." "Don't knock the tragic love story," Cadden replied. "Romeo and Juliet did wonders for literature." "Yeah, and they both died," Gale pointed out, which was a fair critique. "Details, details," Cadden waved it off like a particularly annoying fly. "Point is, unpredictability is our best friend." "Then we're bestiz with a ticking time bomb," Ivor said. Cadden clapped his hands together, the sound sharp against the distant rumble of the alien probing. All we have to do is keep them on their toes, or whatever they have instead of toes. And how do we do that without getting obliterated? Miko asked, more curious than skeptical, which was a refreshing change of pace. Simple, Cadden said, as though he had planned this all along. We act irrationally. Zet chuckled, a dry sound that echoed in the sparse utility room. Good thing this crew's got irrational down to an art. Exactly, Cadden said, his grin widening. Let's throw everything at them. Miko, I want you to start sending them signals, random, nonsensical patterns. Confuse the hell out of them. Got it, Miko replied, practically bouncing to his station with enthusiasm that was almost painful to witness. Pax, can you rig something up that makes the systems behave erratically without actually breaking them? Pax emerged from under the console, oil smudged across his face like war paint. I can try, but no promises it'll be anything other than a light show. Perfect, Cadden said. Zet, work with Gale on feeding them false data, make it look like the dome's a complete wreck. Gale didn't look thrilled at the prospect, but she nodded. I can handle that. Nothing like a bit of creative writing to baffle the enemy. And Ivor, keep an eye on the defenses. Last thing we need is a surprise party from our friends out there. Ivor gave a grim nod, checking his weapons with the kind of methodical thoroughness that suggested he could do it in his sleep. If they come knocking, they'll regret it. Cadden took a deep breath, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a particularly persistent vulture. All right, team. Let's give them a taste of good old-fashioned human chaos. As the crew set to work, a peculiar energy filled the dome, a mix of desperation and determination, seasoned with a healthy dose of madness. It was absurd, really, this plan of Cadden's. But then again, when you were facing off against an alien ship that could snuff you out with the flick of a proverbial wrist, absurdity felt like the only logical choice. The lights flickered in time with the sporadic bursts of electricity as Pax worked his magic, or whatever the opposite of magic was when it came to engineering. The air felt charged, like the prelude to a storm, only this storm was of their own making. How's it going over there, Miko? Cadden called out, trying not to think too hard about the fact that their leader was still unconscious. Voss had been the glue holding this crew together, and without her, they were a bit like a ship without a rudder, or a spaceship without thrusters. Good, I think, Miko replied, eyes glued to the console, fingers dancing over the keys with the kind of rhythm that suggested he might have missed his calling as a concert pianist. Sending signals that make as much sense as a politician's promise. That's the spirit, Cadden said, feeling a flicker of hope that he desperately clung to. Zet leaned back in his chair, a rare look of satisfaction on his face. I've got enough false data here to make even us question what's real. And that's different from our normal state of confusion. How? Gale asked, not looking up from her own console. Cadden turned his attention to the observation window, where the alien ship loomed like a great dark leviathan against Europa's icy ocean. It was beautiful in a way that made his skin crawl, all sleek lines and predatory grace. Do you think this will work? Pax asked, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. Honestly, Cadden shrugged, a gesture that conveyed more confidence than he felt. I have no idea. But it's better than sitting here waiting for them to decide they want us as their new aquarium pets. I don't know, Zet mused, a wry smile twisting his lips. I could do with a little less responsibility and more fish food. Focus, Cadden said, but there was a touch of laughter in his voice. We might just pull this off. Or we'll make history as the crew that confused aliens to death, Ivor added, a grim sort of humor in his tone. Either option works for me, Gale said, her fingers a blur on the keyboard. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. The dome shuddered occasionally, a reminder that they were dancing on the edge of a blade. But as the plan unfolded, something remarkable happened. The alien probes began to falter, their patterns less precise, more erratic. They're hesitating, Ivor said, watching the monitors with a trained eye. Like they don't know what to make of us. Welcome to the club, Cadden muttered under his breath. Keep it up, Zet urged, a note of excitement creeping into his voice. "We might just pull this off." Cadden watched as Miko continued to send signals into the void, a symphony of nonsense that was both an act of defiance and a plea for understanding. There was something poetic about it, a message in the bottle tossed into the cosmic sea. "Incoming message," Gale announced, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "It's from them." Cadden felt his heart skip a beat. "What does it say?" Gale's eyes scanned the screen, her expression shifting from surprise to something that looked suspiciously like amusement. "They want to talk." "Talk," Pax repeated, disbelief coloring his tone. "That's a first." Cadden couldn't help the grin that spread across his face. "Well, let's not keep them waiting." "Open a channel." As Gale worked to establish the connection, Cadden took a moment to revel in the absurdity of it all. Here they were, a ragtag crew of misfits on a lonely moon, engaging in interstellar diplomacy with the power of sheer unpredictability. "Channel open," Gale confirmed, her voice steady. Cadden leaned forward, his hand hovering over the console as he spoke into the void. "This is Cadden Rhyme, acting commander of the Europa Research Dome. To whom am I speaking?" There was a pause, and then a voice came through, strange and melodic like a song sung in a language just beyond comprehension. It was both beautiful and eerie, a haunting reminder of how alien their visitors truly were. "We are the observers," the voice said, each word carefully enunciated. "We wish to understand your erratic nature." Cadden exchanged a look with Zet, who was practically vibrating with excitement. "Well, observers, you're in luck. We specialize in erratic." The alien voice hesitated, as if unsure how to respond to humor, a human specialty if ever there was one. "We do not comprehend your actions." "Join the club," Pax said under his breath. Cadden took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "You see, observers, humans are unpredictable. We feel things deeply, and sometimes we act on those feelings. It's what makes us, us." The voice on the other end was silent for a moment, and Cadden wondered if they had lost the connection. Then it spoke again, softer this time, as if contemplating something deeply profound. "We seek to understand. Perhaps we have much to learn." Gale shot Cadden a look, one that was half disbelief, half admiration. "Are they acknowledging our humanity?" "Seems like it," Cadden replied, surprised by the turn of events. The tension in the room eased just a fraction, as though the universe had decided to throw them a bone. It wasn't much, but it was something, a glimmer of possibility in the vast expanse of darkness. "Observers," Cadden said, his tone more earnest now. "Maybe we can learn from each other, but for now let's agree not to destroy each other." There was a pause, then a soft, almost musical affirmation. "Agreed." As the connection ended, the room fell silent, each member of the crew processing what had just happened. It wasn't a victory, not by a long shot, but it was a start. "Did we just win them over with chaos?" Pax asked, incredulous. "Looks like it," Zet replied, a grin spreading across his face. Cadden couldn't help but laugh, a sound that was equal parts relief and disbelief. "Only humans could turn chaos into diplomacy. And survive," Ivor added, his voice tinged with newfound respect. With the threat no longer immediate, Cadden allowed himself a moment to breathe. They had bought time, and sometimes that was all you needed to turn the tide. The lights in the dome steadied, a testament to their perseverance in the face of insurmountable odds. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt, but for now they had something they hadn't dared hope for: a chance. As the crew regrouped, sharing smiles and silent nods of solidarity, Cadden couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. They were a motley crew, mismatched and flawed, but against all odds, they had done the impossible. And that was the beauty of humanity: imperfect, unpredictable, and utterly indomitable. The room was still buzzing with the aftermath of their unexpected diplomatic triumph, the air thick with disbelief, and the faint stench of ozone from Pax's improvised repairs. It was a miracle, the kind that usually required a hefty dose of divine intervention or a really good con artist. Cadden Rhyme, now thrust into the unlikely role of reluctant hero, was still trying to wrap his head around it. He had gone from dodging responsibilities like a dodgy insurance salesman to becoming the face of humanity's first contact with an alien race, all thanks to a plan that had more in common with a prank call than an interstellar negotiation. "So," Pax said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that might have been cleaner if he'd used it as a mop, "what's the plan now, Captain Diplomat?" Cadden, leaning back in his chair with the sort of lazy grace that suggested he might tip over any second, grinned. "We give them a show they'll never forget. Zet Miko, let's keep feeding them a steady diet of nonsense. Ivor, keep our defenses primed. And Pax, whatever you did to the systems, keep doing it. Just maybe with a bit more finesse. I'd like to keep breathing." "Finesse," Pax muttered, rolling his eyes. "Sure, I'll just sprinkle some pixie dust over the circuits and hope for the best." Miko, whose youthful optimism was either endearing or infuriating depending on your mood, was already busy at his console. He had the enthusiasm of a caffeinated squirge, fingers tapping out symphonies of gibberish that would have made any human communication system short-circuit in despair. "You got it, Cadden. The aliens won't know if we're inviting them over for dinner or challenging them to a dance-off. Knowing you, it'll be both," Cadden quipped. Gale, perpetually annoyed and somehow managing to look even more so, seemed to be having a silent conversation with her computer. "I've got the sensors set to emit false seismic readings. According to this, we're currently experiencing an earthquake, a volcanic eruption, and a solar storm all at once." "Sounds like a regular Tuesday," Ivor observed with the kind of grim humor that suggested he'd seen worse. "Just keep it believable enough that they don't think we're trying to sell them beachfront property in the Sahara, or a timeshare on a sinking island," Zet added, not looking up from his screen where lines of code danced like tiny digital soldiers marching to war. Cadden stood up, the weight of his new role slowly settling on his shoulders. "All right, people, let's keep them guessing. The more unpredictable we are, the less likely they are to start blasting us into fish food." "No pressure," Pax grumbled, tapping away at his own console with the air of a man defusing a bomb with a toothpick. As the dome shuddered with another pass of the alien ship's probing systems, Cadden took a deep breath. The plan, if you could call it that, was simple: out-crazy the aliens. It was like trying to win a staring contest with a blindfold on, but if anyone could pull off the impossible, it was this ragtag crew of misfits. Oddly enough, the universe hadn't sent them its best and brightest, but somehow that was working in their favor. "How's Voss doing?" Cadden asked, glancing towards the medical bay where their fearless leader lay unconscious, her absence a silent reminder of the stakes they were playing for. "Still out cold," Gale replied, her voice laced with frustration. "If she wakes up and finds out you've taken over, she might just decide going back to sleep is preferable." Cadden chuckled, though there was a hint of truth in Gale's words. Voss was the kind of leader who made decisions with the certainty of a chess master. Cadden, on the other hand, was more like a guy playing checkers with missing pieces. "Well, let's make sure she wakes up to good news, shall we?" In the moments that followed, the dome's occupants fell into a rhythm that was chaotic but strangely harmonious, like an orchestra tuning up for a performance only they knew the score to. Every console beeped, clicked, or hummed with an urgency that suggested imminent disaster, a shared language of impending doom. As Cadden watched the alien ship through the observation window, he couldn't help but feel a grudging respect for these enigmatic visitors. They floated above, a silent giant with unknowable intentions, and yet here they were, trying to understand a species that couldn't even comprehend itself most days. "Signals are steady," Miko reported, his voice carrying the sort of adrenaline-fueled excitement usually reserved for extreme sports or last-minute tax returns. "They're definitely paying attention. Then let's make sure they get their money's worth," Cadden said, flashing a grin that was more confident than he felt. The lights flickered again, a dance of shadows that played across the walls like ghosts of past failures. But Cadden was determined not to add to that spectral roster. He might not have asked for this responsibility, but now that he had it, he intended to see it through. Pax, ever the pessimist, snorted. You know, if this doesn't work, we're going down in history as the first crew to annoy aliens to death. Could be worse, Zet quipped, eyes never leaving his screen. We could have been the first crew to bore them to death. Or the first crew to host an intergalactic tea party, Ivor added dryly, checking his weaponry with the precision of a surgeon. The minutes ticked by, each one stretching out like an eternity as the alien ship hovered in silence, its intentions unclear. Cadden felt his heart pounding in his chest, the rhythmic thud a reminder of his humanity, fragile yet fiercely alive. Suddenly, the dome shuddered violently, and alarms blared, their shrill cries echoing through the corridors like a pack of deranged banshees. Pax cursed under his breath, hands flying across his console in a desperate bid to stabilize the systems. What the hell was that? Cadden demanded, fighting to keep his balance as the floor seemed to tilt beneath him. Looks like they're not buying our act, Gale reported, her voice calm despite the chaos. They're testing our defenses again. Then let's show them just how unpredictable we can be, Cadden said, determination sharpening his features. Miko, Zet, give them everything we've got. Overload the sensors, scramble the comms, hell, throw in some music if you have to. Music? Miko asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. Yeah, why not? Cadden replied with a shrug. Let's see how they handle a bit of Beethoven at full volume. Zet grinned, already tapping away at his console. You got it, Captain. Let's give them a taste of culture. As the strains of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony blared through the dome's speakers, Cadden couldn't help but smile. It was absurd, sure, but sometimes absurdity was all you had. And besides, if they were going to go down, they might as well do it in style. The alien ship hesitated, its movements wavering as if caught off guard by the unexpected serenade. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless, and in that moment it was enough. Keep it up, Cadden urged, his voice carrying over the chaos. Let's confuse them until they're too dizzy to shoot straight. Gale, expression softening for the briefest of moments, nodded. You know, Cadden, you might just have a knack for this. Don't make me blush, Cadden replied with a wink, though there was a hint of genuine gratitude in his voice. As the crew worked in concert, a strange energy filled the dome, a mix of desperation, defiance, and something almost like hope. It was a symphony of human emotion, raw and unfiltered, and it was beautiful in its own chaotic way. Then, as if by some unspoken cue, the alien ship began to back away, its probing systems retracting like the legs of a startled spider. The crew watched, breathless, as their unlikely adversaries retreated into the depths of Europa's icy sea. Did we win? Miko asked, disbelief coloring his voice. Looks like it, Pax replied, his tone incredulous. I can't believe it actually worked. Never underestimate the power of human insanity, Zet declared, a triumphant grin splitting his face. Cadden let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his relief so palpable it was almost tangible. They had done it. Against all odds, they had turned the tide. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they had bought themselves precious time, and sometimes that was all you needed to change the game. We did it, Cadden said, his voice a mix of awe and pride. We actually did it. As the crew celebrated their unlikely victory, Cadden allowed himself a moment to reflect on the madness of it all. They were just a bunch of mismatched humans, each with their own flaws and quirks, but together they had forged something remarkable. You know, Cadden mused aloud, maybe there's something to this whole unpredictability thing. Or maybe we're just bloody lucky, Ivor countered, though there was a rare smile on his lips. Luck's as good a strategy as any, Gale said, her eyes shining with a rare warmth. As the dome settled into a fragile calm, Cadden felt a sense of camaraderie that went beyond mere survival. They had faced the unknown and come out the other side, battered but unbroken. It was a small victory in a universe where victories were few and far between, and for now, that was enough. All right, team, Cadden said, clapping his hands together. Let's get back to work. After all, we've got a planet to save. And as the crew dispersed, each with a renewed sense of purpose, Cadden couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, proving once again that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, chaotic, unpredictable, and utterly indomitable. The sound of clinking tools and a symphony of curses filled the dome's corridors as Pax did his best impression of a one-man band, or rather, a one-man patching up what the universe tried to break maestro. If there was one thing the universe loved, it was throwing a wrench in well-laid plans. And if there was one thing Pax loved, it was throwing that wrench back, preferably with a few more expletives attached. "Pax, how's it going?" Cadden's voice crackled over the intercom, sounding about as relaxed as a cat in a dog park. "Well, let's see," Pax replied, wiping the sweat from his brow with the air of someone who'd just been told they had to hold up an entire sky. "I've got duct tape holding together what should be highly sophisticated technology, and I'm pretty sure I've just rerouted life support through the coffee machine. On the bright side, if we run out of oxygen, we'll at least die caffeinated." "Great, keep it up," Cadden said, doing his best imitation of a motivational poster in human form. "We've got a message to send back to Earth, and I'd rather not have it be Dear Earth, it's been fun, but we've decided to take up residence as fish food." Pax shook his head, muttering as he worked. "If I wanted to juggle flaming chainsaws, I would have joined the circus instead of getting into engineering." He pulled a final lever, praying to whatever cosmic deity was listening that the life support systems would hold, at least long enough for them to gloat a bit. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew was busy compiling a message to Earth, a task that was proving to be about as easy as herding cats with laser pointers. "We need to make this sound good," Miko insisted, his boyish enthusiasm still somehow intact despite the chaos. "This is our chance to show Earth what we're made of." "Yeah? Insanity and bravado," Zet chimed in, adjusting his glasses in that precise way he always did when he was about to say something that sounded like an equation. "Let's not forget the duct tape engineering." Cadden scratched his head trying to find the right words. "Look, we're not selling a vacation here. We just need to let them know we're still kicking and not to bother sending flowers for our funeral just yet." Viridian Gale, ever the pragmatist, raised an eyebrow. "And how do we explain the part where we played Beethoven to the aliens?" "Easy," Cadden replied, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "We tell them we offered a cultural exchange. They probe our systems, we blast their auditory sensors with classical music. It's a win-win." Ivor, looming nearby like a silent mountain with an arsenal, grunted. "Hope Earth's ready for the idea that we won with musical diplomacy." Next thing you know, they'll be weaponizing opera. The crew worked fast, and within hours the message was drafted, a testament to their collective insanity and resilience. The plan was simple: paint themselves as the scrappy underdogs who'd faced an alien threat and managed to come out the other side, bruised but not broken. "All right, let's send it," Cadden said, leaning back in his chair with the air of someone who was all out of ideas and running on caffeine and pure spite. Miko tapped away at his console, a flurry of keystrokes sending their carefully crafted message out into the void. It was a gamble, just like everything else they'd done, but one they hoped would pay off. As the signal shot through the inky blackness of space, the crew took a collective breath. They'd done all they could, and now it was up to the bureaucrats and politicians back on Earth to figure out what to do with it. If they were lucky, they might even get a medal, or, more likely, a lecture on why playing symphonies to aliens wasn't protocol. "Think they'll believe us?" Miko asked, his youthful optimism tinged with doubt. "Believe? Probably not," Zet said with a shrug. "But let's be honest, we're not exactly known for our sanity or adherence to protocol." Cadden chuckled. "Yeah, well, crazy or not, we're still here, and that's got to count for something." With the message sent, there was little to do but wait. Waiting, a state of being that had become all too familiar lately. But even as they did, there was a sense of camaraderie and shared victory that permeated the air. They'd faced down an alien threat and lived to tell the tale, even if that tale was one of duct tape, classical music, and a healthy dose of luck. As the Iors turned to days, the crew busied themselves with repairs and maintenance, the dome slowly returning to a semblance of normalcy. It wasn't perfect, but then again, neither were they. They were patchwork heroes, stitched together by circumstance and necessity. In the quiet moments, Cadden found himself reflecting on how far they'd come, not just in terms of distance from Earth, but in terms of growth. What had started as a mission filled with uncertainty and dread had transformed into something more, a testament not just to human survival, but to human ingenuity and stubbornness. Voss's absence still loomed large, but there was a sense that, wherever she was, she'd have been proud of what they'd achieved, or at least she'd have been mildly amused by their antics. In a rare moment of downtime, Cadden found himself in the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of ocean that surrounded them. It was both humbling and awe-inspiring, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the smallness of their place within it. "Hey!" Gail's voice broke the silence as she joined him, her expression less annoyed and more contemplative. "You okay?" "Yeah," Cadden replied, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "Just thinking about how weird this all is. We're floating in an undersea dome on a moon of Jupiter, and we just had a staring contest with aliens that we won through the power of classical music." Gale smirked. "Guess that's why they call it the final frontier, huh? No rules, no guidebooks. Just us making it up as we go along." "Pretty much," Cadden agreed, his lips curving into a smile. "But you know, for all the chaos and near-death experiences, I wouldn't trade this for anything. We've made something out of nothing, and that's no small feat." "True," Gale said, her voice softening. "But let's not make a habit of it, okay? I'd like to get back to the comforts of Earth someday." Cadden chuckled. "Agreed. I miss real coffee and not having to worry if the air I'm breathing might suddenly evaporate." As they stood there, side by side, watching the alien ship's silhouette fade into the darkness, there was a sense of quiet triumph. They'd done what few had, and in the process, they'd grown closer, forging bonds that were as unbreakable as the dome itself, at least when it wasn't being probed by curious extraterrestrials. "Think they'll be back?" Cadden asked, his tone casual but with an underlying seriousness. Gale shrugged. "Who knows, maybe, maybe not, but if they do, we'll be ready." "Yeah," Cadden said, nodding. "And next time maybe we'll throw in some Mozart for good measure." "More danger, more music," Gale quipped, her signature wry smile returning. With no more aliens knocking at their door, the crew settled into a new rhythm, one that was a blend of routine and readiness. Life on Europa was never going to be easy, but then again, nothing worth doing ever was. As they went about their tasks, there was an undeniable sense of accomplishment. They'd faced the unknown and come out stronger for it, not just as individuals, but as a team. It was a reminder that, no matter how bleak things might seem, there was always a way forward. Sometimes, you just had to be willing to take a leap of faith, or in their case, a leap of absurdity. In the weeks that followed, Earth responded, the bureaucrats perhaps scratching their heads at the report of an alien encounter mediated by music. But it was a response nonetheless, one that confirmed their efforts had not gone unnoticed. As the crew gathered to listen to the official communiqué, there was a sense of relief and validation. They weren't alone, and while Earth might have been a distant memory, it was still home. "Looks like they want us to keep exploring," Zet said, scrolling through the message with a bemused expression. "Guess we're not done being humanity's guinea pigs," Cadden grinned. "Wouldn't have it any other way. Besides, who else is going to play DJ for the next alien encounter?" With a newfound sense of purpose, the crew returned to their duties, each of them buoyed by the knowledge that their efforts had made a difference. There were still challenges ahead, but they'd face them together, armed with experience, duct tape, and perhaps a few new symphonies. In the quiet moments, Cadden found himself once again staring out at the ocean, a sense of peace settling over him. They were far from done, but for now they'd earned a break, a moment to bask in the glow of their improbable victory. "Here's to the next adventure," Cadden murmured, raising an imaginary glass to the stars. "May it be just as unpredictable as the last." And as the dome hummed softly around them, a bubble of humanity in a sea of the unknown, Cadden knew that whatever came next, they'd face it head-on. Because in the end, that was what humanity did best: adapt, survive, and when the mood struck, give the universe a run for its money.